Nadia threw herself into his chest and burst into tears. Pavel gently held her, turned around, and, supporting her, led them toward the exit. The people were stunned and silent. Then one person from the company, as if waking up, asked, "Can someone explain what's going on here?" But no one answered. Only one girl from the group, who was planning to marry Pavel, grabbed his coat and rushed out onto the street. She was the only one who knew that Pavel wasn't the biological son of a local oligarch. They walked along the waterfront, the three of them. Pasha held a bottle of mineral water in his hands. "Well, that's it. My adoptive parents have emigrated abroad, leaving their business to me. I've expanded it now, and I'm living quite well," Pasha said. "True, we couldn't love each other, but we pretended everything was fine. How about you, Nadia? And why do you have speech problems?" Nadia took out her notebook and wrote for a long time. Pasha hugged his fiancée, and they both understood that they weren't in a hurry to go anywhere. They sat in the park until morning. Reading carefully what Nadia wrote, Pasha moved several times, circled the bench without holding back his expressions, letting off steam. Then he sat down again and continued reading, with letters flowing before his eyes. As dawn broke, he said, "Honestly, I'm freezing, and I don't understand why we're still here." His fiancée laughed. "Well, you're right, it's warmer at home." Nadia stood up. She didn't want to let go of little Pashenka, but she understood that he had a completely different life. She hugged him and walked down the path. He looked at her in surprise, then caught up with his mother. "Where are you going?" Nadia quickly wrote. "Home," Pasha replied. "Where mine is. Thanks to your grandmother, Tonya, for letting you stay there, but you won't return there anymore. We're going home. We have a lot of plans, and the first thing we'll do is help you regain your ability to speak." Nadia looked into his eyes for a while, then burst into tears. Pasha said, "You told me crying is shameful when everything is fine." Pasha smiled. It was the only thing he remembered, her and him, and of course, their immense greatest love. Several months passed. The waitress girls burst into the owner's office. "Oh, come and see." He jumped up, startled, and immediately understood what was going on. Nadia was sitting at one of the tables with her brother. She saw him and smiled. Well, of course, recognizing Nadia in this very beautiful lady was impossible. "Hello, Nadia. I must confess, I'm simply shocked." "You look beautiful," the restaurant owner said, wide-eyed. Nadia smiled even wider. "Well, it turned out that Pasha quickly solved all my problems." I'm immensely happy," she said. They headed towards their door. Pasha said, "I have a feeling he'll come back." But I asked, "What did you take?" Her voice trembled traitorously, and Pasha looked at her in surprise. At that moment, the restaurant owner insisted on standing next to them. "Perhaps you wouldn't mind going to the movies with me." Pasha turned away so that none of the couple would notice his smile. If you enjoyed the story, please support me with a thumbs up button, just one click. It means a lot to me. Thank you. They all seem strange to me, and you're also trying to prove something with aggression, the old woman said, not speaking too wisely in Nadia's opinion. But the girl listened attentively, absorbing it all like a sponge, because nobody had taught her life's wisdom before. When she finally tasted freedom, it was true liberation. The institution she had spent so much time in was hardly distinguishable from a prison. Nadia promised herself that she would think 7 times before taking any action, but once again, she couldn't keep her promise. For another 3 years, she fought to secure housing for herself. The officials understood that she couldn't express her thoughts in words, so they shuffled her from one department to another until one day, in a fit of anger, she began writing complaints to every authority. Finally, she was heard, or rather, her words were read. They provided her not just a room, but a small apartment. Perhaps the authorities were trying to appease her, to prevent any cause for outrage. Nadia found a job as a janitor at the train station, and slowly but steadily began building her life. And then she met him, Roma. Their romance was perfect. He was handsome, calm, and read everything Nadia wrote with great attention. They understood each other so well. Everything was wonderful and amazing. Roma promised that he would soon start his own business, and Nadia would never have to work as a janitor again. He even said she would be a part of his company, and he would support her so she could be his wife with a dowry. Nadia believed him. She even set the festive table when he came with another man to officially include her in the documents. But one day, she couldn't enter her own home. The neighbor opened the door and said, "You're knocking, but it's pointless. Roma sold your apartment. He sends his regards and has gone somewhere." Nadia called the police, but all the documents were in order. Within a month, all the apartment documents were transferred to his name. Only then did Nadia realize what documents she had signed. She quietly slid down the wall and then lunged at her once-beloved door, banging and even trying to gnaw at it. She wept, but couldn't hear anything. That's how she found herself back in the psychiatric hospital, in the madhouse, as it was called. For the second time, her grandmother, Tonya, came to get her from there. She helped Nadia recover from everything that had happened and took her in. After some time, Nadia got a job as a janitor in a restaurant. It was a stroke of luck because the owner was fine with Nadia quietly cleaning, without engaging in idle chatter with colleagues. Besides, she did her job well, and he allowed employees to take leftovers from the kitchen. After all, those ingredients would have been thrown away anyway, and it brought Nadia happiness, relieving her of the need to think about food. At first, it was tough because her colleagues made fun of her, but over time, they grew accustomed to her and even became friends. "Nadia, stay a little longer today," the boss said. She nodded but looked at him questioningly. "Some rich folks are partying here, reserved several tables, and, as you know, they can be quite messy." "We constantly need something to clean," the owner said. He always addressed everyone by their names. The evening was relatively calm, and Nadia relaxed a bit. She always felt anxious when there were many guests, since each one demanded explanations that she found difficult to give, as words sometimes didn't obey her, and intoxicated people always asked numerous questions. Today, the company seemed to be slightly older, all around 30 or even older. A waitress approached Nadia and said, "Did you happen to find a broken glass there?" Nadia picked up her cleaning tools and went to the dining area. Two men stood near a table, laughing loudly. Nadia approached and began cleaning up the shards, preparing to leave. Suddenly, one of the men grabbed her hand. "Wait, woman, answer this. What came first, the chicken or the egg?" he asked. The other man waved his hand dismissively, but the man in the expensive suit shook his head negatively. He seemed to be in a playful mood and wanted to hear the opinion of a bystander. Nadia remained silent, staring at the floor. "Well, why aren't you saying anything?" Pavel asked, parting ways with the man. He wasn't used to being ignored, especially by a janitor. A waitress rushed to them. "Stop it, she's not mine," she said to Pavel. He fell silent for a moment. Then he turned Nadia towards him. "Mine, why didn't you say anything?" he asked, sounding uncertain. She couldn't meet his gaze, paled, and it seemed like she might collapse any second. The guy stopped smiling, looking at her intently too, and suddenly the woman extended her hand and gently caressed his cheek, just as she used to when she was very young. A dead silence fell over the room. Pavel coughed and then said to Nadia, very hesitantly, "Nadia." No, you promised." Nadia screamed and broke free from the caregiver's grasp, but they held her tightly. Inna Nikolaevna hissed, "Avushka, oh, you crazy mess. No one needs you with your character. But your brother will live with a family, you'll see, and he'll succeed in life. No, you promised. You said they wouldn't separate us." Nadia bit the caregiver's hand and rushed towards the gate. There, a couple was almost forcefully putting a crying 5-year-old boy into a car. He waved his little hands and legs and cried loudly. Nadia, Nadia. The woman finally couldn't take it anymore and slapped the boy. The man grabbed her hand, saying, "What are you doing?" She got scared herself and pressed her hands to her chest, while Pasha remained stunned. The man quickly put him in the seat and fastened him. The car quickly moved away when Nadia finally caught up to it. She grabbed the mirror, something else, and the car sped up. The man following behind her saw her clearly, but he didn't stop, hoping she would let go of his car. The woman looked at her in horror from the back seat, and Pasha kept screaming and pounding on the window. Finally, the man rolled down his window and forcefully pushed the girl away from the car. Nadia fell, hitting her head hard, and the car accelerated. It disappeared behind the houses, leaving her wondering what had just happened. The caregiver and the director of the children's home ran up to her. Nadia silently looked in the direction where her brother had been taken away. They ended up in a children's home after a fire. Nadia managed to pull her brother out through the window because the fire reached their room last. No one else survived. They were in the hospital at first, even put in the same room because Nadia never let go of her brother's hand, and he clung to her and cried all the time. They searched for any relatives for a long time, but after finding no one, they sent them to the children's home. On the first day, Nadia threw a tantrum, or rather, Pasha cried. She yelled and argued, "Director of the children's home, we can't be separated, you understand? We can't." "Yes, don't you understand? Here in the children's home, there are rules. Pasha must live in the boys' room, and you with the girls. We can't keep you together." Inna Nikolaevna was tired inside. "I don't understand what you're trying to achieve. No matter how you want it, there are rules here. Nobody is going to separate you. We don't separate brothers and sisters." "Do you want me to read the rules to you later when you calm down?" the caregiver offered. Pasha listened attentively and nodded, resting his head on Nadia's shoulder. Then he pulled away and asked something. Nadia nodded and, after a moment of thought, nodded to Pasha. The director let out a relieved sigh. From that day on, Nadia and Pasha lived in separate rooms, only separated at night and when Nadia was in class. But Pasha, who was about to turn 5, seemed to have internal clocks. He stuck his nose to the window pane 10 minutes before his sister returned from school. The caregivers shook their heads in amazement. They had never seen such a strong bond between siblings before. And then those people appeared in the children's home. No, people came quite often, but as soon as these people arrived, they immediately started hovering around Pasha. Nadia wasn't worried because the director had firmly promised her that they wouldn't be separated. "Nadia, it's time to eat," the caregiver and the nurse said, standing by her bed. She hadn't gotten up or eaten for 2 days, and she hadn't sung. It was unclear if she was asleep. The girl simply didn't move. "This can't go on. We need to get her up," the caregiver said and forcefully sat Nadia up in bed. She sat there for a minute, and then her eyes rolled back and she fell. 10 minutes later, she was being taken away in an ambulance. There, the children's home was left behind. She never returned. They sent her to another facility where children with various health problems lived. She couldn't speak anymore. When she left the walls of the children's home, she already knew that nothing good awaited her. But Nadia couldn't even imagine the challenges that life had in store for her. The first thing she tried to find out was something about Pasha. She couldn't explain anything with words, only through writing. They laughed at her in the institution, and then they sent her to a psychiatric hospital. There, Nadia spent nearly a year as a troubled girl because she tried to prove she was normal through her silence. She's not dumb. She would gesture with her hands, lunge at the staff, mumble, spit. How else could she act when no one gave her paper and a pen? Then, an old nurse took pity on her and started feeding and teaching her. If you can't do something the right way, don't go crazy. Think about it before you make a bold move, and then do it right. You're already strange, don't take offense.